They say the internet is full of lies, but some stories feel too real to ignore. Whispers in the dark, shadows that move when no one's there. On our scary stories, the truth hides in plain sight, and sometimes it follows you. Story 1. Being a medium is no fun. This woman hired me to find who killed her parents. Lana Dawson welcomed me with a tired smile. She was desperate, like everyone who hires a medium. And I was just as desperate, which is why I was back to this gig. Trying other jobs only confirmed that I wouldn't make a living doing anything else. Lana hired me because it had been 20 years since her parents were brutally murdered in that house, a crime that remained unsolved despite an extensive police investigation. She was 15 at the time, and luckily at her grandma's. She tried private detectives before, and they found nothing. In the end, I imagine reluctantly, she found me through a friend of a friend. Good thing for her, I needed the money and booked my flight right away. It was a typical home in a quiet Florida suburb, surrounded by mostly vacant houses. Lana decided to never sell it, keeping it frozen in time, perhaps hoping someday it would help her find the truth. As she led me inside, an old woman next door was watering her plants, the only neighbor left. She glanced over and gave me a polite wave. "This is a peaceful neighborhood of mostly widows and retirees," Lana explained later. Nothing like that ever happened before or after. The sorrow still present on her face was undeniable, even after all these years. The living room was completely empty. Not even spiders roamed around. There was just dust and a single light bulb no one had ever bothered to take down. Lana pulled back the curtain, flooding the space with sunlight probably for the first time in ages. She gave me a quick tour through the kitchen and bedrooms. I could tell she wasn't very hopeful that I'd find anything, and I couldn't blame her. Never promise a client results. That's a rule I learned early on. Most of the haunted houses I visit have nothing to see. Either the dead moved on, or they simply don't want to be disturbed. Not the kind of pitch that brings in clients. But spirits tend to remain where they died. The energy of death clings to a place, anchoring them there. If Lana's parents still lingered in this house, they could talk to me. I asked her for a chair and placed it in the center of the living room. "I'll try to channel the voices of the spiritual world now," I told her. "So please, we need to remain silent." That was just a fancy way of telling her to stay quiet so I could hear if any dead would actually talk. I sat down and closed my eyes. For several minutes I waited in silence, hearing nothing but the wind and birds outside. I was ready to give up and explain to Lana my no-refund policy when I heard faint weeping. It was soft, almost inaudible, and gradually grew louder. "Is there someone here among us?" I called out firmly. The crying stopped, and a metallic, ethereal voice asked, "Can you hear me?" "Yes, I can." "Who are you?" No response. The entity resumed crying. I explained what I heard to Lana, who was now slightly more excited by the discovery. It could be her family. "Please tell me, are you Mr. or Ms. Dawson?" I tried, though the weeping stopped abruptly. "Do you know where Ms. Dawson is?" the voice asked. "I want to tell her I'm sorry." "What do you mean? Sorry for what?" The light flickered for a second, and I saw the curtains shift slightly before the answer came. "For what I did to her," the voice confessed, its tone laced with sorrow, "for killing her the way I did." I felt my heart pound in my chest and turned to Lana. "I don't think this is your experience. Spirits can be deceitful. It wouldn't be the first time some smart-ass ghost tried to play me for a fool, so I didn't immediately relay all I had heard to Lana. She would probably freak out anyway, and I needed her to stay quiet for the rest of the session. "Who are you?" I asked next, to no response. "Do you know what happened that day?" I tried again. This time, after a long pause, the voice answered, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," it murmured. "She shouldn't have had to die." That was an interesting response. "What about Mr. Dawson?" I asked. "The man got what he deserved." The voice suddenly deepened, taking on an almost demonic tone. The light bulb flickered violently. Its reaction made sense based on what I had read about the crime scene. Mr. Dawson had died from 15 stab wounds, most likely in his bed. The killer was probably driven by emotion. But Ms. Dawson showed signs of a struggle. Her only fatal injury was a deep slice across her neck. Maybe her death wasn't intentional at first. This could actually be the murderer. But why did you do it? I decided it was time for tough questions. I just want to help you find peace. It's the only way you'll leave this house and see her again. There was a long silence. Then it spoke, its words thick with emotion. Because I loved her more than anything. I used to watch her every day, getting in her car, walking the dog, buying groceries. She did it all with that same smile. When she waved at me, I felt it in my bones. That doesn't explain why you killed her, I pressed. My questions likely revealed the true nature of the voice to Lana, and her eyes widened in shock. I didn't want to, the voice roared. The bulb exploded, making Lana jump. I just wanted to get rid of him so we could be together. But she wouldn't accept it. She wouldn't come with me. The weeping resumed. I pressed for more answers, but got nothing. Everything I had heard spun in my mind like a whirlwind. When everything clicked, I stood up and walked to the door. Lana was as pale as snow, visibly shaken by what had happened. Even if she hadn't heard a word, the energy in the room was impossible to ignore. She asked me why I was leaving. "I'm just thirsty," I casually said. "There's no running water here, so I'll ask that old lady next door for a glass. I'll be back in a minute." The neighbor looked surprised to see me knocking on her door. She was a tiny, fragile lady, maybe in her 70s. She was making bread dough, but stopped to answer and invited me in for some water. As I followed her to the kitchen, I took a look at her home. Furniture that had to be at least half a century old and a large portrait in the living room of her and her husband, taken long ago. She handed me a glass of water and went back to kneading the fresh dough. "I hope you don't mind me doing this," she said, using all her small weight against it. "I just love having them ready for dinner." "Don't mind me at all," I thanked her, sipping the water slowly. "By the way, you and your husband are so beautiful together in that photo," I said, referring to the portrait. Her face stiffened for a brief moment before returning to its usual warm smile. She confessed to me he had abandoned her years ago, but it was hard to let go of the memories. One day he simply got out and never returned. Determined to change the subject, she asked what I was doing in that dusty, abandoned house. I told her I was a medium. "Oh, that's fun," she giggled. "Did you find anything there?" "Yes, as a matter of fact, I did," I answered. "I found your husband. He told me a lot about you, about him, and about what he did to the Dawson family." She froze, hands still buried in the dough. Slowly she turned around, scanning my face to see if I was joking, if I really knew the truth about what had happened 20 years ago. I didn't. It was a bluff, an educated guess. For the killer to be a spirit trapped in that house, he had to have died nearby. For him to know the private details of Miss Dawson's life, he had to be someone that lived close. Someone who could watch her every move, like a neighbor. And there were not many of them around here. I had no idea it would work. My theory could be pretty much wrong, but the bluff paid off because the woman broke down in tears. For Lana, finding the truth was all that mattered, and I gave it to her. Her family had been killed by a neighbor obsessed with her mother. In an act of desperation, he took advantage of the night to break into the house and confess his feelings, just as she had gone to the kitchen for a glass of water. When she rejected him, he grabbed her and slit her throat with a sharp fish knife. Then, in a fit of rage, he walked into the bedroom where her father slept and stabbed him to death. It took me a few more sessions with the killer to get the whole truth out. The old lady confirmed and admitted to Lana that she had suspected her husband all along, and when she confronted him, he fled, never to be found, probably dying somewhere years later. The end. Or at least that's the end, I told Lana. I can't say she was happy about it, but at least she knew now. There could finally be peace. What I didn't tell her was that the husband never fled, and his wife didn't simply confront him with words. When he arrogantly admitted to the crime, showing no remorse, she shot him with the handgun they kept under the bed and buried him in the backyard. I advised the woman to lie to Lana, keeping her safe from any legal trouble. That way, everything would end up in its right place. The old woman in her home. The husband, trapped inside that house, drowning in his regrets. Fuck his peace. The end. Story number 2. My mom used to hide under my bed at night. I was born in 2000, grew up in a small town in northeast Ohio. We had one of those little ranch-style houses, all on one floor, 3 bedrooms. It was just me and my mom for most of my life. My dad left when I was a baby. She was a good mom, from what I remember. We didn't have much money, but she made sure I always had what I needed. She worked as a waitress at a restaurant in the center of town, always tired, but always kind. We'd watch movies together at night. She'd tuck me in, kiss my forehead, and tell me she loved me. I felt safe, except at bedtime. I must have been about 6 or 7 the first time I noticed it. One night after she tucked me in, I heard the floor creak after she turned off the light. Not out in the hall, right by my bed. I remember freezing, listening. Then I heard the sound of her breathing, slow, heavy, right underneath me. I leaned over the edge and whispered, "Mom?" She didn't answer, just this soft little giggle. Not mean, not playful, just weird. I called for her louder. After a few seconds, she crawled out from under the bed like it was the most normal thing in the world. Smiled at me and said, "Go to sleep, sweetheart. Mommy's here." Then she left the room. The next night, same thing. I heard her crawl under right after lights out. The soft thud of her knees and hands against the floorboards, the shift of the mattress as she settled in, then the breathing. I was too little to really question it. I thought maybe it was just a game she liked to play. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't a game. It became a routine. She'd tuck me in like normal, turn off the light, and then she'd get under the bed, every single night. And then she started doing little things. She would tap on the wood under my mattress in these odd rhythms. 3 taps, then 2, then 4. Sometimes it sounded almost like a song, other times like random patterns. If I moved or sat up, she'd stop until I lay back down. A couple times I caught her peeking out from the foot of the bed. I'd feel eyes on me and look down, and there she was. Her face just visible in the dark, one eye glinting in the faint light from the hall. No expression, just watching. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie stiff under the covers, too afraid to move or call for her. If I tried to leave the bed, she'd grab my ankle. Not hard, just enough to stop me. Then she'd giggle again, that same soft, weird giggle. I never told anyone. How do you explain something like that when you're a kid? I figured no one would believe me. It wasn't every night that something scary happened. Some nights she'd just lie there quietly. I'd hear her whispering to herself sometimes. Words I couldn't make out, soft and steady, like she was talking to someone I couldn't hear. This went on for years. During the day, she was totally normal. Made my lunch, helped with homework, joked with me, hugged me. I remember trying to work up the courage to ask her about it once when I was around 10. I said something dumb like, "Mom, why do you sleep under my bed?" She just blinked at me and smiled. "Oh, buddy, I don't do that. You must be having silly dreams." But that night she was there again, and the tapping was louder. By the time I was 9 or 10, I stopped looking under the bed. I started sleeping on the couch when I could get away with it. Eventually, when I turned 11, she told me I was old enough to have a lock on my door. She never came back into my room. I don't know why she did it. I don't know what changed. She passed away when I was 23. Cancer. In her last week, she was confused a lot of the time, drifting in and out. But one night, when I was sitting by her bed, she grabbed my wrist and said very clearly, "I kept you safe, you know. You were never alone at night." I still don't understand what she meant. Story 3. I stole my own identity, and I think my family is getting suspicious. It was late September when I had returned home. I had just come back from a summer camp that lasted 2 months. I couldn't tell you much about the camp or its counselors. I know I had a good time, except when I got lost during a group nature hike. When I finally was able to find my way back to camp, it was late and no one was in camp. When I returned home, my parents were surprised to see me. "Max, you're home?" my mother asked. She slowly approached me and looked me up and down. She then dropped to her knees and hugged me. I could see my father standing in the doorway looking at both of us. He swiftly turned and locked himself in the den. He must have still been angry with me. Before summer camp, I had broken into his gun cabinet with some friends from school. My friend Benny accidentally pulled the trigger of one of the guns and shot a hole in the wall. No one was hurt, but my friends scattered, leaving me with the smoking gun. When my dad found out what had happened, I got the lecture of a lifetime. Do you have any idea how stupid that was? You're extremely lucky no one was hurt," he scolded. "I'd ground you, but I'm just glad you'll be out of my sight for the next 2 months." He then kicked me out of the den and sent me to my room without dinner. A knock at my door startled me as I was looking at some magazines Benny had snuck me during class. I opened the door to see my sister, Riley, standing there with a plate of food. "Mom said to sneak you a plate," she said, pushing the plate into my chest. She was taller than me, but I would assume her big, colourful hair that reeked of hairspray helped to contribute to her height. I looked her up and down, seeing her wearing her jean jacket vest with her Black Sabbath shirt underneath. Her neck was weighed down by the several necklaces she frequently wore. "Are you going out?" I had asked. "No, twerp. I just dress this way and put on war paint before I go to La La Land," she sneered. "Do Mom and Dad know?" I asked, chewing through some broccoli. "They don't, and you better not tell them either," she whispered. "Or I'll tell Mom about your nudie mags, you little perv." She had me dead to rights. I nodded, agreeing to keep my mouth shut. Later that night, after my parents went to bed, I heard the window open from Riley's room. I went back to bed. The next morning, I came down for breakfast: pancakes, eggs, and bacon, a weekend staple for my family. My dad already sat at the table, coffee in front of him, his nose in the paper. He never said a word to anyone until his second cup of coffee, but today he was extra silent. Must still be angry with me. Riley didn't come down for breakfast. Normal for nights, she sneaks out. "Are you excited about going to summer camp, sweetie?" my mom has asked. I nodded as I stuffed my face with bacon. "Will your friend Benny be there with us?" she asked, putting down a plate of food for my dad. "No, he ended up getting summer school," I said, looking back at my mom. I could hear my father scoff from behind his paper. He never liked Benny, said he was a bad influence. It wasn't until the early afternoon when Riley finally came downstairs, still wearing her Black Sabbath shirt from last night, her hair a mess, and her makeup mostly cleaned off with the slightest hint of eyeliner. She shot me a look as she grabbed a plate covered in plastic wrap from inside the microwave. She then sat down next to me on the couch and watched cartoons with me. "What time are you supposed to be leaving?" she asked. I think 2 p.m., I answered, not entirely sure. "What is the name of the camp?" she asked. Camp Manatari, I think it's called," I answered. "Oh, that's it in Sleepy Falls. I remember we went there once on a family vacation. You were like 2 years old when we went. It was a weird place," she said. "Weird how?" I questioned. "I don't know. I just remember something not right about that place. Maybe it was just because I was 7 at the time. The world seems a lot bigger and stranger when you're a kid." She laughed. "You're still a kid," I quipped. Yeah. I graduate next year and I'll likely be moving away for college. Mom will be devastated. Look out for her, okay?" she said, ruffling up my brown curls with her fingers. I could smell the faint scent of cigarettes stained on her fingers. I tried cigarettes once with Benny. I felt like the inside of my throat was being punched by a fist that was on fire. It was about 2:14 p.m. when a bus pulled up to the house with Camp Manatari written on the side of it. I hugged my sister, and my mom kissed the top of my head. My dad was there to see me off, but he didn't say anything, didn't even shake my hand like he normally would do whenever I went somewhere for a long time. It was about a 4-hour drive until we reached the small town of Sleepy Falls. The bus weaved through the winding streets of the market district of the town. The townspeople all would come out of the shops to see the bus drive by. None of them waved or smiled. They just looked at us. When we reached the tree line for the forest, it was another 20 minutes until we reached the camp. The councillors greeted us at the bunkhouses and commanded us to gather our belongings and head to our designated bunks. The first few days at camp were mostly just a tour of the camp. It had a lake with boats and fishing, various tables for eating and crafts, an archery area, a go-kart track, and a garden. There was a hiking trail that would lead deeper into the forest. By the 4th night, the councillors sat us by a fire to share ghost stories. "Miss Keene, could you tell us about how the camp got its name?" one kid asked. The young councillor known as Miss Keene was only a few years older than my own sister, with straight red hair that was pulled back into a ponytail. "Of course, So the town of Sleepy Falls was founded by European settlers in the 15th century. There was a local legend about a forest guardian known as the Manatari that would stalk the forest and abduct those who wandered into the woods. No one knows if this legend was brought over by the European settlers or if it was a story created by the local tribes. Some say it's some sort of fae, others say it's a spirit, she explained. I raised my hand to gain an answer to the question that began to swell my brain. Yes, Max, was it? She said, pointing at me. Why would they name the camp after a monster that abducts people? I asked. I believe it was in honor of the creature's benevolent behavior as a protector of the forest. She answered. Now, how would you all like to hear the story of the horseman from hell? She asked. The kids cheered, ready for the next scary story. I didn't pay much attention to the rest of the night. When we all turned in for bed, I just thought about how much I already missed home. My mom, Riley, even my dad. The next couple of months were just regularly scheduled events. A couple of weeks before the end of camp, Miss Keene became sick. She stayed in her bunkhouse most days, only occasionally being seen from her window, watching us play. Eventually we stopped seeing her. I asked another counselor what had happened to her. Oh, Miss Keene. We had to send her to the hospital. She was really sick and not getting any better. He answered. Will she be back before the end of camp? I asked. No, maybe next year, he answered. Hey, no more questions. Let's get ready for one of our last nature hikes, he said. The hike was like all the others. Same trails, same trees, same plants. During the hike, I started to lag behind a bit, daydream about what happened to Miss Keene, and thinking about how by the end of the week, I'll be back home. I hope my dad isn't still mad at me. Ma, Max, a voice reached out from behind a tree. I stopped in my tracks, looking around, but I didn't see anyone. Ma, Max, the voice said again. I recognized that voice, even though I hadn't heard it in 3 weeks. It was Miss Keene. Miss Keene, is that you? I asked. Please help me. You don't have to do this, Miss Keene said. Please follow me, children, she called to me. Guys, hey, I found Miss Keene. I think she's hurt. I yelled to the group ahead of me, but they didn't hear me. I decided to follow the voice to find Miss Keene. If she was hurt, I could help her using the first aid skills I learned from one of the camp events. I followed the voice further into the forest, farther away from the trail. Before I knew it, I got turned around. I was lost. I never found Miss Keene. I decided to backtrack the best I could back to the camp. Somehow, someway, I made it back. I was still being embraced by my mother. She was crying on my shoulder. I could feel her hot breath from her wails against me, her tears slowly dripping into my shirt. From the den, I heard a loud pop sound. It was a similar sound to when Benny accidentally shot the gun in there months ago, just more muffled. I could hear rumbling coming from the stairs as Riley came running down then. What the fuck happened? She cried. She came and stopped in the doorway as soon as she saw me. Oh, Riley, I said as I pulled myself away from my mother's grasp. She collapsed to her hands and knees as she cried even harder into the tile. What the fuck? She screamed as she turned around and ran back upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. I walked over to the phone on the wall and picked it up and listened. I could hear Riley's ragged breath, her trying to hold back tears. 911, what is your emergency? A voice asked. Hello? Please send help. I'm at 3232W Holly Lynn. She said desperately. What is happening there? The operator asked. It's my brother. He's downstairs with my mother. I think my father shot himself. She cried. Your father shot himself? Okay, we'll send a cruiser and an ambulance your way. The operator said. No, that's not it. My brother disappeared a month ago at summer camp. They found his body in the woods. We buried him last week. That thing downstairs is not my brother. She screamed, her voice finally breaking down in cries of both sadness and fear. The end. Story 4. My roommate is part of a cult. He's trying to get into my room right now. I don't know if I'll have time to finish this. If someone finds my phone, the password is 22746. You can take everything. Just please post this somewhere. Anywhere. They can't do this to anyone else. His name is Renan. When I moved in, he was just a quiet guy with a black backpack and hollow eyes. Never smiled. Never left his room after 2 a.m. I thought he was just an introvert. But last night, while he was in the shower, I heard something coming from his room. not music, not a conversation. It was a prayer, repeated, almost sobbing, in a language that shouldn't exist. I recorded a bit of it. I'm too scared to listen again. There are symbols scratched beneath his bed. I found my name in one of them, written in blood. I didn't know how to react. I freaked out and tried to ignore Renan. Earlier tonight, the doorknob turned slowly. No knocking, no calling my name, just turning, like he was checking if I was still awake. I ran and locked the door, pushed the dresser against it. The sound stopped, but now there are footsteps in the hallway. He's pacing back and forth. Sometimes he stops right in front of the door, just stands there, silent. Then goes back to the kitchen, except I heard two voices. One was his, the other one, I don't know. It couldn't be the TV. It's impossible. There's someone else here, maybe more than one. I didn't hear the front door open, let alone close. Someone got in, and I don't know how. Renan isn't alone. I don't know what they're planning. I don't know if they're planning something for me. I never should have found out. I live on the 3rd floor, no one gets in through the window. But maybe I'll have to go out that way. I just called the police. The operator told me to stay calm, said they're sending a patrol. But I know this neighborhood. It'll take time, maybe too much time. I tried texting my sister, just a simple something's wrong, but the message wouldn't send. Then my screen froze. Not cracked, not glitched, just stuck, like something didn't want me to speak out. When it finally cleared, all my past messages with her were gone. Like I never had a conversation with her in the first place. I told myself it was panic, that I was imagining things, but then the lights flickered. Not like a power surge. Every bulb dimmed at once, slow, deliberate, like the entire apartment was holding its breath. The window's too high to just jump. I don't know if I'll make it, so I'm leaving this here. They're trying to break in, pounding, like they're ready to tear the door off its hinges. If I disappear, I want someone to find this. I want someone to understand what's going on, what they're doing. I can't be the only one. One more time. His name is Renan. We live at 1342 Hollow Creek Drive, Building 3, Apt 204 in Portland, Oregon. He's white, 5'10", blonde hair and eyes that never seem to blink. He might look harmless, but he's not. Please find them. The dresser won't hold much longer.